Today, let's talk about the truth behind the migration crisis and how we've really screwed things up. There's been heaps of heated discussion lately about migration being one of the key drivers to the current housing crisis, and the data shows there is some truth to this. Net overseas migration hit a record 681,000 people in 2023. That's almost triple the historic average of around 217,000. That spike in migration, assuming an average number of 2.49 people per household, equates to a demand of 216 additional dwellings in 1 year. But we only built 179,000 new homes. You see, this imbalance has put massive pressure on house prices and rent, especially in our biggest cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, causing a housing emergency. So the quick solution, $10 billion to build more homes. But with housing sites of just 155,000 forecast in 2024, we're going to be well below our average and are going to need more tradespeople to build more homes. But we don't have enough tradespeople, so the solution is to get more tradespeople in. But that's going to put more pressure on housing and we're going to end up in this crazy loop again. Or is a better solution just to have less people / migration numbers? Well, in this video, let's discuss these 2 points and look at the impact it's having on property prices, rental prices, and our society and how things are likely to pay out in 2024. But before we do, let's go back to the beginning and work out how we actually got into this situation. We see a big factor was the COVID-19 travel bans. Shutting our borders temporarily reduced demand and gave the impression that we had migration under control. But once the bans got lifted, we got a flood of new arrivals and visa holders all entering at the same time. I'm sure you remember, but Australia closed its borders to all non-citizens and non-residents in late 2020 and fully reopened back in July 2022. By March of 2023, Australia's population growth hit 2.17%, the highest rate since 2008. Net overseas migration, which is arrivals minus departures, is currently at record annual highs at 681,000 people in 2023, or 518,000 new arrivals if you look at financial year. Now keep in mind the pre-COVID decade average of net overseas migration is 217,000. Like I said before, if we're assuming an average household size of 2.49 people, we're going to see a demand of extra 216,000 dwellings needed in a year when there are only 175,000 built last year. There's a huge shortfall. There's more pressure with new household formations as more young Australians move out, buy first homes, and start their own families. Since COVID, we've seen a pretty big reduction in the average household size. And as I mentioned, the high level of net overseas migration in the past year is partially because of the travel ban, but it's also been pushed higher because there's been less people leaving overseas. There's been a 22% drop in departures combined to the historic 5-year average. The decline in departures is explained by the ABS as a lagging of fewer arrivals in recent year, which is translated to fewer departures. Without the COVID travel ban restrictions, historic migration patterns suggest that net overseas migration probably would have been closer to average in the year to March 2023. Most experts are saying the strong spike in migration last year will normalize over time and we'll see it return to normal levels. The unfortunate reality of all this is the government didn't use the pandemic period to implement better long-term migration planning. We just went straight back to business as usual without enough housing in place to cope with influx. It's really a perfect storm of a poor policy. So who's been hurt the most out of all this? Well, it's the rental market. The housing of migrants tends to skew rentals in the short term. From the figures, fluctuations in overseas migration usually immediately impacts the rental market rather than the purchasing market. ABS data on permanent migration showed that 60.8% of migrant arrivals in the last 5 years to 2021 were renters. But it's not people moving to Australia's fault that rental costs have gone up. It's really our uncapped visa system that's allowed lots of people to resettle. Probably should have had smarter targets in place and infrastructure to keep up with it. But as I've said a few times, it's not migration, it's also household formation. After COVID, we had more people living alone or in smaller households. And with interest rates at historically low levels, we had less people living in more households. So there were less properties available to live in.
Where did they all go?
So a sharp reduction in the number of people per household early in the pandemic added dwelling demand by about 120,000 households per year. This was pretty much while border restrictions were in place and people wanted more space to live, work from home, etc. During the COVID years, we had historically low interest rates and it was cheaper than ever to buy your own home and live it on your own rather than to get a friend in to rent a room. The bottom line is we failed to plan ahead properly. And now the talk of temporary migration bans are just a bit of a band-aid solution for what we need is a long-term solution. We need sustainable population policies tied with the capacity of our housing market and infrastructure. But how are we going to build more homes to house more people when we're in a building and construction crisis? Long term, the reality is we need more tradespeople. We've had a pretty long period of pushing people to white collar jobs, universities, rather than TAFE and blue collared work. Part of that over the long term is we need to change our attitude as a country, focusing on white collar jobs and look at more of those blue collar ones. But in the short term, potentially we're going to need skilled migrants to help with the gaps in the construction sector. Also keep in mind that construction of new public housing in Australia is at its lowest for 40 years and existing aging public housing stock is severely underfunded. The public housing waitlist in Victoria, for example, was at 45,000 applicants. And in fact, Queensland government built 485 public houses in the past financial year. The UK has tried to take some action around this to ease their housing system and relax visa rules to get qualified tradespeople in to help build more homes. The Western Australian state government also announced a grant of up to $10,000 for settlement of skilled migrants and construction to boost building companies. We really need to fix the supply side of things because there's still going to be more and more demand with more natural disasters and properties getting older and out of commission. And in this case, migration is actually a good part and a good thing. It's been a part of what Australia's been built on over the years. Positive migration can help increase productivity in the economy, which is a good result for everyone. If we don't fix this problem sooner, we're setting ourselves up for a perpetual cycle of housing shortages and unaffordable prices. So overall, I think we should focus less on arbitrary migration numbers and more about streamlining housing development, getting more homes out there and cutting red tape to house more families and lower income Australians. We need policies that support affordable housing, and even the government needs support to make more government housing available. If we don't act now, the property market is only going to get worse and more unaffordable. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'd love to know your perspectives, and until next time, see ya.